Hi friends, I'm outside and I'm not planning on being funny today, so don't worry. You're not going to have to skip forward when I start telling jokes. I am in a serious mood because I'm lonely. I'm lonely for Zen Buddhist friends. So today I want to talk about the three jewels in Buddhism. Specifically, I want to open up and unpack this idea or jewel of Sangha. So of course the three jewels are Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So the Buddha is the teacher, and it's said that we need a teacher to manifest the wisdom of the tradition. Otherwise, it's just words. But we also need the teachings. We need the tradition or the lineage. We need these books of koans, arguably, or the sutra books, or the words of Dogen, or Bodhidharma, or Shakyamuni Buddha himself. We need the teachings, okay? And then the third thing we are told we need is the Sangha, or the community of practitioners. Now, do we really need a community of practitioners? I mean, out of the three jewels, the third, the Sangha, usually seems to be the one where people scratch their heads a little bit. And they're like, you know what? I got a teacher. I got the teachings. Do I really need a bunch of knuckleheads called Sangha members to help me with my practice? When I was at the monastery, I was having trouble with a monk who actually did not have a head. It was just a wrecking ball made out of solid concrete, and it had two little eyeballs. It looked very much like a face, but in between the two ears there was just solid concrete. Homeboy was like a tree root. Trying to dig up that stubborn tree root? Well, this guy was one of those, and I went to my Zen mentor at the time and I was complaining, and he stopped me and he said, Sangha is your practice. And he also said, and I don't know if this is true, the Buddha said that the hardest thing about the path is the other people that are on it. When I remember that, when I remember what a nightmare it was to be living at a monastery, it seemed like you were in some kind of social experiment sometimes, and it was just like, let's throw some really unique human elements together and see what kind of an emotional explosion we can induce. When I remember that, I'm very happy to have graduated from what my Zen master used to call the Buddhist kindergarten, which was the monastery. But on the other hand, this past weekend, I had the opportunity to hang out with the Sangha of a friend of mine. They have a place up in the Alps, and they had a summer party this past weekend. Summer party's like a European thing. They all gathered. We had some wine. We had some beautiful American chili. I loved it. We sat up there. I'll show you some footage here. We sat up on the porch, and we looked out over the mountain at the paragliders and the beautiful Austrian Sound of Music-ish countryside view, and we traded stories. And the Zen people, they're such a good Sangha, this group. It's not always the case that you have a good group in Zen, but these people are. They're gentle, and they're smart, and they're respectful, and they're conscious, and they're aware. You know, they're not competing and like slinging shade at each other. And I realize, I miss Zen communities. And this is kind of my community here, but mostly my practice is done by myself, on my own. So what are some of the benefits of a Sangha? Well, first and foremost, and like most obviously, a Zen community forces you to practice, right? They meet at a certain time, in a certain place, and they engage in something really important that you believe in and that you want to be a part of. And so you hop in your car, or you get on the bus, you enter the Zendo, You participate in the rituals. You sit down on your cushion. Now you can see you've taken a whole journey to get to this moment of practice. It's a real commitment. And when the human body and mind commits on that level, something gets hammered in on a deeper cellular level than, say, arguably, perhaps, if you just walk from your living room into the bedroom, fold your own pillow, throw it on the ground, do a couple bows, and start sitting in your bedroom. There's bells, there's robes, there's teachers, there's people, there's like a begging box, there's possibly a Dharma talk. There is so much context to support your practice. It's a little bit like your Zen life is a boat, right? And you've got your paddle, and you're sitting on that boat, and you're paddling, and you're paddling, and you're paddling, and you're not really paying attention to the massive, massive sail on your big, badass Zen boat, right? And then the wind comes in and it hits that sail and just pushes you along, and you're floating along, and you're like, holy bananas. Well, that wind at your back can be a Sangha or a community of practitioners, in my own personal experience. The other thing that's really beneficial about having a Sangha is what I call Osmosis Insights. So I had the opportunity this past weekend to hang out with a friend of mine named Steven, who has a channel called Guru Viking. Go check it out. Actually, Steven and Brad Warner and I we had a conversation recently that Steven taped, and it's going to be aired soon on Guru Viking in any event. I asked him, I was like, so you interview spiritual teacher after spiritual teacher after spiritual teacher. Like, did you ever run into anybody who seemed like a total fraud? And he told me some stories. And I don't want to put words in his mouth here now that I've mentioned his name, but the impression that I got was sometimes you have folks who are like self-taught, and they don't have any kind of community to hold them in place, and they have perhaps some very mundane and fixated insights that they think are fantabulous. But actually, if you have a community, or what I call a community, you get something I call Osmosis Insights, which is, you had this same insight that I had on the cushion. Let's put those insights together. Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about practice. Something happens when you're hanging out in a community of people. A kind of hive or group mind arises that you're a part of, and truly your own practice brain becomes far bigger, broader, and even better than your own individualistic little practice brain. And kind of you don't stink of your own biases, your own BO biases, you have a way of processing what's going on that includes the people around you and makes you bigger than yourself. Osmosis Insights. After a while, you know things that you didn't know that you knew. And it's simply because you're working in a group of people, and it can't be overstated how important that is. Human beings are social creatures, and we need each other, whether it's in a community or a society where we buy groceries and have electricity, or spiritually when we're sitting on a cushion trying to put our life together. Does that make any sense? On a similar note, sometimes the practice is just plain better when you're doing it with other people. Your own practice is just plain better. Sorry to have to say it, but it's true. This past weekend, when I was sitting with my friend's Sangha, I realized how important it is to be in a room with other people breathing around you. Your non-existent souls align, and it's like you're all breathing together. It's almost like you're rhizomatically connected beneath the surface, your lungs, You're one body of practitioners. It was a different experience because I've been meditating mostly on my own and often with my girlfriend, and that's it. And being in a room of people on the top of a mountain, breathing quietly together, I felt like lifted on the wings of all their practices. And I had to ask myself a hard question. I had to say, you know what? Is your own practice better when you've got other people there doing it with you and supporting you as you support them? Is it just plain better? This isn't an easy question to ask, nor is it a question I like to ask here on YouTube or Patreon, where I first post these videos, because I feel like a lot of people who are supporting me on Patreon or who are watching here on YouTube, I feel we are a community-less community. A lot of us are practitioners without strong affiliations to a particular group. Speaking of groups, there's a lot of mosquitoes out here, groups of them. I'm getting distracted by making this video, and then I look down and I see a mosquito, and being the samurai lay Zen priest that I am, I smack the thing, and there's an explosion of blood all over my leg because they've been sucking on me for like 20 minutes, and it looks like I just got shot. Where was I? So I just made a pitch for the spiritual community, Sangha, which is not something I often do on this channel because I really enjoy being a spiritual free agent. I'm kind of a bit of a loner. I don't really like joining groups and following the rules of groups and obeying my superiors in the hierarchy, depending on where I am slotted in said hierarchy. I mean, people often look at spiritual teachers and like frown and say, how did they get to be in that exalted position? To which my reply is always, at a Zen center, you get demoted to positions of authority. So if you're not careful and you're too competent, suddenly you're running things, right? Because nobody wants to be in charge. It's a lot of work to run these communities. And being in these communities can be a lot of work. So I'm enjoying being a spiritual free agent. And I want to talk a little bit about the idea of karma as I have sort of taken it and twisted it to fit my own purposes. Do you hear that European siren over there? I'm in the park and, I don't know, maybe there's somebody running through the park exposing himself and they're coming to get him. It wasn't me, I swear. There are a lot of teachings in Buddhism about karma. I never got any of them. And that means I can speak freely and quite ignorantly about karma because I have no teachings in my head to compare my own brilliantly dubious ideas with. And I used to think karma was a load of hooey. Now I've come to think of karma as an interesting concept. And here's how I define karma. Very simply, karma is your situation. What situation do you find yourself in today? Are you in a relationship? Do you have a job? Where do you live? Etc., etc. A lot of things came together. We can argue about free will. I will not. We can argue about whether or not one can truly choose in life or if there's not some kind of predetermined situation. Nonetheless, all of us find ourselves in a situation. And for me, that's my karma. Now, I think what's really important is to be where you are and who you're with completely. And sometimes we're led to or we find a community. It's kind of like a spouse. Maybe you're single right now and you're like, I really, really, really want a spouse. I really want a spouse. I really, really, really want somebody. The worst way to find somebody is to be desperate to find somebody. Life just somehow doesn't reward that kind of thirstiness, right? And so I remember when I was in Los Angeles, I really wanted a spiritual community and a teacher. And so I kept running around looking for it. And I kept finding communities that I would then leave. So ultimately, I had to learn how to practice on my own, because that was the situation that I found myself in. If you don't have a community to sit with, awesome. Because ultimately, you have to learn how to do it on your own, in my experience. And when you do that, I think your karma can shift. And eventually maybe you locate a community and can experience all the boons of that community that I mentioned earlier, like those Osmosis Insights and the inspiration to practice and the fraternity and camaraderie of a really great group. But it's like when you're single and you're learning how to be alone, and you can come home to your bachelor's apartment, sit down on your couch, and be okay with it. There's a kind of strength that arises when you learn how to do things alone. One of the gifts of a Sangha is you very quickly see your practice self and yourself, your issues, hang-ups, personality, where you're at in life, and Zen. You see all that because you're comparing yourself to others. And that's good. But there is a way of being truly alone where you embrace it with like courage and openness and awareness, and you sit down on your cushion in your bedroom, in your living room, by yourself, maybe with your cat or your dog or your goldfish, and you learn how to sit, right? And I think ultimately all of us learn how to sit when we're alone. And then we can bring that to a group practice. Sometimes we can learn it alone on the cushion with a group around us, but it's very often the case that, and I've experienced this personally and I have noticed it observationally, it's very often the case that we begin to use the community as a kind of a crutch. And we feel like if we just show up, they all know you, they smile at you, you're all kind of on the same level. You go through the motions, you sit down on the cushion, you drift a little bit, and then you're done. You did your practice, you're a Buddhist, you went to church. It's like Sunday Mass as a young Catholic or a Christian, right? You go through the motions and finish it. That is one of the biggest dangers of practicing with a community, in my experience, is you just become like everybody else in the community. You become one of those rule-following, sycophantic company men who can't see the trees for the forest, if you know what I mean, to switch that little idiom around a little bit. So in my personal experience, if you can learn to sit on your own, and it's a thing, sitting on your own, it's a different thing than sitting with a group. It requires a kind of real focus and commitment and honesty with yourself about what's happening when you sit and what's going on. If you can learn to do that on your own, then guess what? Your community is the cash register woman who smiles at you and fills your heart. Your community is the your boss who's driving you crazy and who around whom you really have to practice your deep breathing in, deep breathing out, right? He's your teacher. He's your Sangha member, right? It's your family, These are your co-practitioners. These are the people that you connect with and you learn the principles of the Dharma through. I mean, sitting practice, Zen practice, it's a really simple thing when we get together and we sit on a cushion. We're manifesting the simplest thing we can do with as much focus and sincerity and openness and strength and kindness as possible. Giving ourselves to sitting, right? You can do that in a community, that practice, or you can do it by yourself. But the practice remains the same no matter what. And it is my personal prejudice at this particular moment in time towards doing it by myself and then going out in the world and making that my Zendo and the people in it my Sangha. What do you think, folks? How do you feel about this YouTube and Patreon Sangha that we've got going here? Leave some comments in the comment section and let me know. You can support this venture by going to patreon.com/Shozan Jack Hobner. You can also make a one-time donation through PayPal. There's a link in the video description here. You can hit like, you can hit subscribe. It helps this channel out. But otherwise, I just throw these things out there and offer them for free and hope you get something out of them. Okay, fellow Sangha members, take care and I'll see you next time. Ciao. Hey friends, what's up? Editor Jack here. Just edited that video and realized that I had a piece of food in my teeth the whole time for the entire video. Just in closing, that's another good reason to have a Sangha. People can point to your mouth and say, bro, you got some spinach on your bicuspid.